Good evening, folks, and welcome to the live stream. I hope you're all very well this evening. Let's see who we have on tonight. We have Akismad. Great to see you, Akismad. Hope you're fine. We have CGM. Great to see you, CGM. Frederick is here. Great to have you on. Stefan is here. We also have Killer. Thanks for moderating, Killer, and CGM. We also have, let me see, Chatty Rat. Hope you're well, Chatty Rat. 91 Leads is on. Great to see you. We have also Master Templar, Artie Bus, good to see both of you. Evelyn is here, great to see you, Evelyn. Hope you're well. We have Alistair Kerr, great to have you on up there in Scotland. We have Sphinxy Cat, great to see you. We have Hugh is on, great to see you, Hugh. Jim is on, great to see you, Jim. Great to see you tonight. Shell is here, great to have you on. Dan, we also have Suzanne, great to see you. Mark Leslie, great to have you on, Mark, once again. George is back, great to see you, George. Barney is here, great to have you on. Bill is on. Who else have we got? Diane, great to see you, Diane. Nick. We also have Richard. Tories don't get tasered. Number 3 is here, great to see you. And so many more. Hope you're all very well. Hope you had a very nice weekend and you're ready for another week of madness. It's Tuesday, it's another week of madness. So we're going to talk a little bit about the marble madness as well that happened today. A little bit about, let me bring up my list. We'll talk a little bit about Rwanda, migration. Lee Anderson also potentially trying to win people over to the Reform UK party. Well, he mentioned that he was potentially bribed. And something about Dominic Cummings. Dominic Cummings, was he lying about his trip to Bernard Castle? Was he lying? Well, we'll have to wait and see. So I just want to start off with the Greek marbles fiasco. So what happened this morning, of course, was the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was supposed to meet with the Greek Prime Minister, and he cancelled at the last minute. At the 11th hour, he cancelled, and he said, look, what we'll do is we'll give you Andrew Dowden, the Deputy Prime Minister. And they were like, okay.
Secretary of State, talk to me about what's going on with the Greek Prime Minister this morning. Have we snubbed him?
Well, look, the Prime Minister's made our position on the Elgen marbles very clear. They're part of the British Museum's collection, and we think they should remain there. The Prime Minister wasn't able to meet the Greek Prime Minister. He was offered a meeting with the Deputy Prime Minister, which proved not to be possible for him to take up. So I don't think I'd characterise it the way you have. Discussions continue between our governments about important matters. So the Deputy Prime Minister was happy to meet with him today, but that proved not to be possible.
OK, so no one's meeting with him. I mean, he's incredibly important. Greece is incredibly important to the UK, not least when it comes to curbing illegal migration. Surely it's not appropriate to snub him in this very public way.
Well, look, all of our international partners are very important. And as I said, the Deputy Prime Minister...
What is it with this cosplaying all the time? Let's send this Transport Minister out to the airport, dress him up like a I don't know, baggage handler or something, and pretend that he's actually doing some work and he's actually doing something important. But back to the main point, I believe Rishi Sunak was doing this for distraction. He's looking for some reason to drive. Once again, it's like immigration. It's like the ULEZ. Remember ULEZ last year or this year, whenever it was. Why is nobody talking about ULEZ anymore? ULEZ was the most important issue to the Tories in the run-up to the by-election, and then the day after, not a word about ULEZ. Yeah, some headbangers at Talk TV continue to complain about ULEZ, but the Tories have not touched ULEZ with a barge pole since, when was it, May or something like that. Isn't it strange how ULEZ is such an important issue? Even the Prime Minister talking about it in the House of Commons, and now nothing, zero, no mention of ULEZ whatsoever. Thought ULEZ was supposed to be the end of the world or something. Implementing ULEZ would destroy the economy, but nothing has happened since. Oh, God. The Tories don't give a flying fuck. No, they don't.
The Minister offered to meet with him today. That proved not to be possible, and I'm sure there'll be future...
Well said, Brad. Man's size of a child behaves like a child. He's so desperate for something that he can try and drive some sort of wedge between different sections of society. But this is a bad one to use because the vast majority of people actually believe that the marbles should be returned to Greece. I'll get to in a moment why this is such an issue in the first place. But the general public, first of all, this is not an issue. This is not something that we should even be talking about. Because Rishi Sunak decided to make an issue out of it by snubbing the Greek Prime Minister. Now, if he wasn't there just to talk about the marbles, he was there to talk probably about immigration, talk about climate change, talk about a whole range of topics. But Rishi Sunak decided, no, what we're going to do is we're going to snub him and then play some sort of political game, try and convince the headbangers that we're on their side once again. It's the same with the small boats. God. Thanks, Brad, for that super chat. So, what are the Elgen marbles or the Greek marbles? What is this all about?
Welcome back. Let's return now to the diplomatic row between the British and Greek governments over the Elgin marbles. So how did they end up in the British Museum? Well, as ever, the man with the answers, Professor Michael Clark, who joins me now on set. Michael, there's so many questions here. So first and foremost, how did they even come to Britain?
The story starts in 1687, when the Parthenon was complete. Had the roof on, all the pillars, everything. And during the one of the many Venetian Ottoman wars, the Ottomans were using it as an arsenal. They were storing ammunition there. And some cretin of a Venetian artillery officer took a pot shot at it and blew it up. And that's what we see now. That's what was left after this most beautiful building ever created, most elegant architectural structure ever created by mankind, was blown to that state that it's in now. And that disaster in 1687 scattered everything. And from then on, people were stealing it, including the Venetians. And so people were taking lots of pieces of it, and it was deteriorating because the Turks didn't care one way or another what happened to it. Lord Elgin goes out as British ambassador to the Ottoman Empire in 1801, determined to save the Elgin marbles and lots of other things from the Erechtheum and the Temple of Athene Nike. He wanted some of these things. Mm-hmm. Now, it was selfish. He wanted them for himself because he wanted to create his own museum. He spent in modern terms, about 5 million of his own money. He got permission from the Ottoman authorities, who really didn't mind, to do this. So it was legal in terms of what was there at that time. And he brought them back to Britain at his own expense.
So he did buy them, in that sense, from the government of the day?
Yeah, he didn't pay them anything, as far as I know. He paid for the removal, and he paid all the costs, which were considerable.
But they didn't belong to the Ottomans. They belonged to the Greek people. But the Greek people were being occupied by the Ottomans at the time.
And he had permission to do so. And he consulted other people. He consulted Canova, the great architect at the time, to see how he could best help and preserve them. He said, look, I'm going to preserve these things for posterity, but also because I want the museum, I want my own museum of them.
Obviously, then they ultimately went to the British Museum. So he sold them to the British government?
Well, in 1816, he had a very expensive divorce to finance. And so he...
So he had a divorce that he needed to finance, so he said, well, actually, I'm going to have to sell them now. So I'm going to sell something that I got for free.
Told them to the British government, who conducted an inquiry in 1816 into the legality of his deal with the Ottoman authorities and declared that it was fine. And then they put them in the British Museum. So they ended up in the British Museum because of his very expensive divorce from Lady Elgin.
And that was 1816?
Yep.
And so the Greek government, of course, today, we know their position, but the evolution of Greece itself, the establishment of Greece itself, is critical to all of this.
There was, the Greek War of Independence starts in 1821, goes to 1829. 1832, Greece becomes a state, a modern state. From the very beginning, within 2 or 3 years, they were asking politely, could we have them back? They were asking again, the ambassadors were asking in 1890, 1910. The Greeks didn't lodge a formal request until 1984, when they lodged a request with UNESCO to say this is a site that we want. Now, one of the things that the British Museum was saying, and all until that time, was, look, if we give these back, they will deteriorate because you can't keep them, which is true. You know, when I first started my pilgrimages to Athens in the 1970s,
Yes, if you keep something in a museum, it will be preserved. But the idea here isn't about preserving it, it's about numbers, about getting people to see it. So it benefits the British Museum to have them. This is, I don't know whether this is an argument of whether they should stay. We could say, for example, they should be returned to Greece and kept in a museum in Greece and not put back into the Parthenon. But that's up to Greece to decide. So I think this whole argument about whether they'll be preserved or not, it should be up to the Greek people to decide how they should be maintained. UNESCO and the Greek government should decide, not the British Museum or the British government. Now, this is all not really an issue because the British Museum and the Greek government have are trying to work out a plan so that these marbles can be shared between the two states. And that's probably the best way to go, diplomatically. But in reality, I do think they should be just returned to Greece. That's their Greek property. They're part of Greek heritage. They should be returned to Greece. Generally, anyone who has a claim to something in a foreign museum should have it returned. It's part of that heritage. It doesn't belong in a foreign country. Viking Stew is a member for 6 months. Great to have you on as a member. Hi Max, it's been 6 months. The membership of the cabinet, like they do that because they are not clever and they don't work. So what is the point of doing it? Yes, what is the point of doing it? Stu, thank you so much also for a super chat. Hey, thanks for that support. How low can they go, the Elgen marbles? All of the UK's problems and some marbles, give them back. Well said, David, yes. And make sure to check out Indie Truck Davies' YouTube channel, The Two Davies. Talks all things Scotland. There are real issues in the world and real issues happening at the moment in Britain that this is just an attempt to distract. Unfortunately, we have bought into it. I'm talking about it. We're talking about it. So, in a sense, Rishi Sunak has somewhat won. They need to go back. Just one more thing on this, and then we'll move on to the next topic. This is James O'Brien with a caller on this topic.
I think we're wasting a lot of time and energy on this because
you rang in, mate.
The first thing is it's not really Rishi Sunak's decision anyway, and he's probably looked ahead of time as an intelligent man and thought, how's this meeting going to go down? Nice to meet you. Can you give the marbles back? I mean, is that likely to happen?
What? Is this caller serious? It's like, can we have the marbles back? And Rishi Sunak will go, no. Oh, okay. That was pointless meeting, isn't it?
You're familiar with the tradition of government leaders from foreign countries coming to this country and meeting our Prime Minister, and there being little of substance to emerge from the meetings. I mean, it's been going on for hundreds of years.
It's a waste of time.
It might be, but that won't be Rishi Sunak's reason for cancelling this one. Otherwise, he would never have another one again, David.
What we need are politicians.
Feel free to completely ignore what I've said and crack on with whatever point it is you think is worth pursuing.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. No, you carry on. You carry on.
What I'm saying to you is, you're on here talking the world out of this, yeah?
Yep.
Why can't we have politicians that are straight up efficient with their words and not waste time?
Well, that's what we don't. So we're having to imagine what he would say if we gave him that opportunity. And if you said, why have you cancelled this meeting? What would he say?
At the end of the day, James, as I said, it's about time politicians say as it is and get on with it and move on to the next topic. I mean, what do we need to appoint a youth representative or something? At least, we'll get something.
No, this is international diplomacy. He has managed to offend. He's managed to offend an entire country. Why has he done it? Well, they're not going to launch. I hear they've just delivered an enormous wooden horse to Downing Street, so it looks like everything's going to be okay after all.
Right. So there's nothing they.
Pointless. The statute of limitations on this subject has run out. Yes, so we have to move on. Just one final thing on this before we do move on. I remember a few years ago there was a bit of a scandal here in Italy when The ambassador, or maybe it was the president of Iran, came to Italy, and they covered up the statues, the naked statues in Italy. I think it was in Milan where he visited. It wasn't Rome, I think it was in Milan. And there was a massive outcry over that. And I agreed with the Italians. Like, if you don't want to see the statues, you can avert your eyes in the other direction. But this idea of covering up pieces of art because it might offend the guest who is coming, I think we're not talking about something obscene. We're just talking about art, Renaissance art that was covered up in order not to offend the president of Iran. Anyway, let's just a point I wanted to raise there, which was just ridiculous. Anyway, I want to move on to something really nice that was in the news in Ireland a few days ago. This is a lovely video that was posted. It's gone viral. I wanted to show it to you. It's about a pub in Northern Ireland where it's promoting this idea during the Christmas period to look after, or have an eye out for older people who may be alone. Spend some time with them. For example, my dad himself, he's going to be alone, although he's going to be with family, but he's now alone. He's a widower. There are people in your area, maybe you can reach out to them, spend some time with them, do some shopping for them, something like that, if you can. It's a really nice story, so I'll just read this.
Is hiding in those weak and drunken hearts.
It is the 2-minute amateur Christmas ad paid for by a Northern Ireland pub that's had social media users in floods. Sweet elderly widower with nobody to talk to, tick. A song that tugs at the heartstrings, tick. And an uplifting payoff, big tick. Amateur actor Martin McManus currently experiencing what it's like to go viral.
It feels pretty good. It's going to be hard to come back down. That's the problem. I'm just enjoying it. I enjoy drama. I've been at it for years and years, and it's great to get success like this. It's unbelievable, actually, the way it has snowballed, you know.
Pub manager Una Burns had the ambitious idea, finding £700 for the shoot.
Never in our wildest dreams did we expect this reaction. It's just what I've seen in the pub over the years, and I suppose I really wanted to get across that message that it's not always a joyful, happy time for everybody, and that some people find it really tough, and just to be kind, and maybe a smile or a simple hello will go a long way.
We're not crying, you are, was the response from John Lewis on TikTok. And there might well be tears, seen by many as the masters of the Christmas ad. While the retailer hasn't said what it cost making its festive Venus flytrap this year, in the past it's thought to have spent around £1 million on its Yuletide commercials.
It's great.
Chief Creative Officer at Adam and Eve, Richard Brim, helped make adverts for John Lewis for 14 years.
It starts from telling an emotional story around Christmas and trying to get people to get them in the fields. There's a proven data to show if you sell the notion of Christmas and how people feel and happiness and togetherness and joy, it doesn't necessarily have to be the product of the year.
The viral response to one pub's festive foray into advertising, perhaps proving that during a cost of living crisis, retailers can stuff their big budgets as well as our turkeys.
That's nice. Okay, moving on. I just wanted to touch on that for a moment. It was very nice.
Thank you very much for being on the programme.
So, voters want to see government control immigration, former ministers say. So, Brandon Lewis, remember the guy who stood up in the House of Commons and said, we need to break international law in a limited and specific way when it came to Northern Ireland. Well, once again, the Tories are banging the drum of immigration and saying that we need to bring it under control. People in 2016 voted to leave the European Union in order to take back control. David McGuinness, thanks so much once again for that super chat. I do a Christmas Day broadcast on those on their own. Loneliness is a problem. Sarah and I enjoy it. That's wonderful. And people do check out Indie Truck Davies' Christmas Day broadcast. It's a wonderful thing. People can listen to it. People can feel connected I think just think of so many older people in particular who are alone, or not even just older people, but anyone who's alone this Christmas. If you know someone in your area, maybe invite them around, even just for a few hours. They'd love that, and it builds a sense of community that's, I think, so lost over the last number of years, especially when it comes to social media, and people are disconnecting from communities, and we need to rebuild that, I think, especially in that period. Alistair, thanks so much for that super chat. Now for an alternative Queens and Not My King speech. Check out the Two Davies show between 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. Christmas Day. Hope to see you there. Yay! I'll make sure to check it out on Christmas Day. I'll just check the time. 12. So it's, for me it'd be 11 a.m. So I'll 1 p.m. So I'll check that out. Thanks for that broadcast.
I love doing interviews with people who've left cabinet and left government, because this is your chance to say what you really think about stuff, right? So.
Apparently so, yes. Yeah, I've not said too much for a year, but yeah.
I was keen to talk about migration, because we've, of course, seen the net migration figures recently showing that they hit a record high under this Conservative government. I mean, it feels a long way from the tens of thousands we were promised by David Cameron.
Yes, and look, there's no doubt it's challenging, and I represent Great Yarmouth, and in Great Yarmouth this is an issue that our electorate, my electorate and voters care a lot about. They want to see the government having control, and the point I've always made, and when I was Immigration Minister, I probably said when talking to yourself, was I think what the public wants to see is that have the confidence of the government have control. The public are not against migration. We have a country of a huge history of migration. We want to make sure there is control, that we know who's coming, and also that we're able to support people who are coming here legally and to deter the slave traders and the criminal gangs who are bringing people here at great risk to themselves illegally.
Do you think...
Then why aren't you cracking down on companies that are taking advantage of people? Why aren't you cracking down on organisations that are taking advantage of people? So many people are working in the black economy. People are working below minimum wage. And what are the Tories doing about that? Pretty much nothing. They're not providing the police with the resources they need. They've been cutting police funding over the last number of years. Yes, they increased the numbers some more in 2019, but that's too late. The police need to be enforced. They need to have the powers. They need to have the resources to deal with gangs in the UK, but also to deal with employers who are taking advantage of people. But they don't seem to be interested in dealing with that. They just want people to focus on small boats. Or students. Criticising students. Students which bring in huge amounts of money to the UK economy.
The government does have control?
Well, look, when the figures are as high as they are, clearly there is a real challenge at the moment. And I think one of the things the government is looking to do, and I will support it to do, is to do more work with our partners across the world. This is a global issue. We're not the only country challenged with this. We obviously have a particular issue as an island with people coming across that treacherous travel across the sea that we need to deal with. But it is a really challenging thing. And obviously we're, as I say, our colleagues in France and Italy, and I remember visiting Greece as well, had some real challenges with this.
Where there's less control, I guess, is illegal migration, the stop the boats that Rishi Sunak's talking a lot about. The Home Secretary James Cleverly saying at the weekend people shouldn't fixate on Rwanda, it's not the be-all and end-all. Do you agree with him?
Well, I don't know exactly, I can't speak for the Home Secretary for James, but I think what he was trying to get at is Rwanda is part of a wider package of things that need to happen. And in that, I would agree with him. And, you know, as I say, one of the things I would say...
Sounds like he's not that bothered about Rwanda, though.
Well, I can't answer that. I don't know. But look, I think the Rwanda policy has become a sort of totem for showing that the government is dealing with this issue and getting control.
It is. It costs 140, 150 million pounds, and it has failed. So if that's the totem, well, then what the hell is all the rest? How can I say? It's a marker for how good the government is doing. Well, if that's the marker, if that's the totem, then it's a demonstration that you have completely failed. Because you've thrown a huge amount of money at a problem and have no results. Zero results. The Home Secretary has been to Rwanda more than anyone has been to Rwanda. Now, of course, the idea of Rwanda is meant to be some sort of both a deterrent and a wonderful place for people to live. Well, which is it? As a deterrent is not working because it's not reducing the number of people crossing the channel. And we know that people will cross the channel because they want to improve their lives. They don't want to stay in France. They have family, friends, some sort of connection to Britain, they don't want to stay in France, and you can't stop them from leaving France. Alistair, thank you so much for donating those memberships. Very kind of you, as always. Thank you so much, Alistair. One to Yoni and one to Unquiet Spirit. Yoni's, I think, already a member of Discord. And Unquiet Spirit, I don't know if you are already, but welcome aboard.
And as I say, I think that comes back to the government showing that it has a plan of how to deal with this. And I think that works at two levels. I think there's the people want to see and want to know that people who are coming here legally. I think there's also the genuine compassion of the British people to know that we're doing everything we can to stop this.
So this whole argument is so messed up, because when they're talking about illegal migration, what they're trying to sell is this idea that it's people coming across the channel illegally. It's not illegal to cross the channel and make an asylum claim. When we're talking about illegal migration, we're really talking about people who have overstayed their visas. People who've had a visa, maybe as a student visa, and then they leave that position and they start working in the black economy. Those are the people, that is what, quote unquote, illegal migration. People who are undocumented. They're no longer part of the system. They've fallen out of the system. Now, the government need resources to deal with that. They need to find out if people have returned to their home country, or if they're staying in the country, maybe they've changed their name, or they've gotten rid of their documents, or they are not respecting the conditions of the visa. Now, every government has the right to deport people who are not respecting the conditions of the visa. People can have the visa renewed, people can have a new type of visa, I believe, but if people are not respecting the conditions of the visa, then the government has every right to deport them. But they're not deporting them because they don't have the resources. You need massive resources to monitor who has had a visa, who's overstaying their visa, who's respecting it, the conditions of those visas. You need resources, and the Home Office is not investing the resources necessary. So when they talk about illegal migration, they're not talking about real illegal migration. They're talking about boats. They're talking about asylum seekers. And that's not the same thing.
This barbaric trade in people, effectively, that puts lives at risk. And that requires things beyond doing it. Because obviously with Rwanda, that's about dealing with the issue once people have already come to the UK. How do we stop people taking this treacherous journey? How do we stop these criminal gangs in the first place?
You create safe routes. That's how you do it. Alistair, once again, thank you so much, Alistair, to Nick Wilson. Hey, thank you for issuing that membership to Nick. So it's all a bit pointless because it's not going to work. And this seems to be creating a split within the Conservative Party and within the cabinet itself. Minister placed down cabinet split over cleverly saying Rwanda plan not be all and end all. So backbench MPs have criticised James Cleverly after he urged people not to fixate on the controversial deportation scheme and says that leaving the European Convention on Human Rights would undermine attempts to stop the boats. So ironically, James Cleverly is the voice of reason here. You know, the bar has been set really low, but James Cleverly is correct to urge people not to fixate on the Rwanda scheme and not to believe that leaving the European Convention on Human Rights, you don't leave the convention, you just don't apply the convention. You leave the Council of Europe, but leaving that would would stop the boats. Of course, it's not. It wouldn't stop the boats. Laura Trott, the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, told Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips, the Home Secretary was on the same page as the Prime Minister, who has pledged to do whatever is necessary to ensure flights take off. But they're not going to take off. She said Rwanda remains central to the government's promise to stop channel crossings, and both were saying it's part of the plan. It is not off the plan. It's not off the plan. Both are saying it is part of the plan. It is not all of the plan. Sorry. Ms. Trott said small boat crossings have already reduced despite no flights taking off, with the £140 million deal held up by legal challenges for over a year. So if Rwanda was necessary to reduce the channel crossings and nobody has been sent to Rwanda, then why are you continuing to push with Rwanda? Like, if Rwanda is not bringing down the numbers, and the numbers have fallen, some of it could be down to the weather. Some of it could be to agreements the UK has with Albania. I don't know. It's strange because we're not seeing a lot of reason behind. We're not seeing a lot of excuse or reason, I should say, behind why the numbers are down, if the numbers are actually down. We have successfully in the last year brought down the numbers of people crossing here illegally by a third. We have. This sounds a lot like inflation. We have brought down inflation. We don't know if it's the UK government that has reduced the numbers. It could be that the gangs are finding other ways, or it could be that the weather is affecting the traffic. This is a time when the numbers coming into Europe are up by 80%. It could be the case that there are different ways the migrations are flowing. For example, some Eastern European countries are getting a lot stricter. There was a crossing of, I think, refugees from Russia into Finland recently. Finland closed the border there, so the situation is very much in flux at the moment, and this is generally a period when numbers are down. But if numbers are rising in Europe, that is. That could be for a whole range of reasons, but we don't know yet. Or we don't know here anyway. I'd like to be very clear that a vote for Reform or any other party which is not Conservative is a vote for Keir Starmer as Prime Minister. So this is about this idea that the Reform UK party, of course, is stealing votes away from the Conservatives on the issue of immigration. And of course, the Reform UK party is pushing the idea that they are the ones who will solve the immigration problem. The Conservatives can't do it. And this is a huge problem. I don't normally get into this in the videos because I'd be ranting and raving a lot for a long time. But a big problem here is that the Conservatives have painted themselves into a corner. They thought that this issue, immigration, would help them win the elections. And to a certain extent, some people will come out and vote Conservative because they're concerned about immigration, or not. Like the concern is misplaced, but they're concerned about immigration. So they vote Conservative. They won't vote Labour because they think they've been convinced by the right-wing media and the Conservative Party that Labour are supportive of open borders, whatever the hell that means. Or they want to return freedom of movement, which is like the same as open borders in the minds of these people. So the Conservatives believe that they have locked in a certain section of society, the racist bigots basically, who will always come out and vote Conservative. But there's a new kid on the block, Reform UK, who will say, well, you don't need to vote Conservative, vote for us. We're the real Conservatives. We're the party who will really deal with immigration. We have a 6-point plan, better than Rishi Sunak's 5-point plan. And what is the plan basically? Well, we're going to send people back to France. How? Reasons, ways. We don't actually have a solution. We use a lot of rhetoric, and that should be enough to send people back to France. It's all a bit pathetic. Guys, we're about halfway through the stream, so I just want to take a short comedy moment, and we'll be back in just a jiffy with more serious stuff. So I hope you enjoy this.
Welcome to Broken News. A healthcare think tank says that the NHS will be in perfectly safe hands once those hands have been run into the ground and then privatised. It comes after a lucrative contract to modernise the NHS and digitise patient data was handed over to a foreign firm because we couldn't possibly do that here in the UK for reasons. Our reporter has more.
For years, supporters of the NHS have said that it's better off in public hands and that money should be ring-fenced to secure its future. But a London-based think tank, whose origins and funding we haven't looked into, has told Broken News that the NHS is a Marxist-Leninist wet dream, which confusingly doesn't turn a massive profit. They've unveiled a new strategy to modernise the NHS and have reassured the British public that subsequent trickle-down economics will definitely help the country overall, as it always does, especially if it costs 100 grand to have a bunion removed. In a statement, they added, Forcing hospitals into never-ending contracts that they can't legally escape from means lovely public-spirited yet private sector firms can charge, say, £80 for a light bulb or 12 grand for an oily speculum, which is by anyone's standards good business sense. Senior MPs, many of whom are handed thousands of pounds by private healthcare firms, but that's totally not relevant to this story, say it's offensive to suggest that private companies have anything but our health and well-being at heart. Well, Broken News has been speaking to the public to find out what they think.
Well, yes, it's an interesting question, but I think private healthcare is a super idea. People need to get over the outdated suggestion that the NHS is there to help them and their children when they're ill.
And what do you do out of interest?
Well, I'm the manager of a hedge fund with heavy investment in private healthcare, but that's totally not relevant to this story. But look, privatisation is a huge profit opportunity, and I think we would be fools not to take that opportunity. I mean, look at the incredible opioid painkillers that the lovely pharmaceutical companies created in the United States with zero downsides or addiction. Wonderful stuff. We too could have that in the UK if we just believed.
So, as you've heard there, the British people have shown unanimous public support for privatisation. Back to you.
What a lovely story. That's all from Broken News. You're up to date.
Oh my goodness, I think that's the best one yet. It's so true. Oh my goodness. So following on from that story about Richard Tice and the Reform UK party, Reform UK leader denies offering Lee Anderson money to defect to his party. So let's hear what Richard Tice had to say about that. Oh goodness.
So what's your reaction to today's immigration figures?
They're appalling. They're a complete betrayal.
Let me get
Actually, what's happened, we've got the highest population where we've come from, our way of life.
Net zero.
Different forms of socialism, and they're saying that's not improving immigration, that's the right thing.
I have to ask you this. You've been watching Nigel Farage and I'm a Celebrity?
Of course, hasn't he been doing fantastically? I think people are enjoying.
He, called you up once he gets back from
I'm the leader. He's made it very clear he doesn't want to stand in a first pass.
Okay. I thought they'd mention it in the clip, but they didn't. Okay, sorry about that. Reform UK leader Richard Tice has denied reports that Tory Deputy Chairman Lee Anderson was offered money to defect to his party. Richard Tice told Sky News there was no money or cash that has been offered to any Tory MP whatsoever. He added, this is about Lee Anderson using the threat of defecting to Reform UK to negotiate himself the deputy chairmanship of the Tory party, because when the article first appeared in February, coincidentally, he was just appointed in the same deputy chairmanship. And I believe Richard, unfortunately, who do we believe in this situation? Richard Tice or Lee Anderson? Well, I actually believe Richard Tice here, because Lee Anderson is a charlatan. And Lee Anderson, in the run-up to that moment, he was doing a lot of social media stuff, clips online, on Twitter, on different outlets, and he was trying to promote himself. Now, I at the time thought he was doing it because he wanted to maybe get a job on GB News or something like that, and I think he was given that position later. But it was about boosting his profile. But it seems he was boosting his profile perhaps to get a better position in the Conservative Party, and he maybe have let slip that he put it out there to members of the Conservative Party that a Reform UK had attempted to entice him to their party. Now, the ins and outs of this is something about 5 years salary or something, an MP salary for 4 or 5 years that would have covered that would have been enough of a corrupting influence to convince him to join a party that he would lose his seat. Obviously, there's no chance that Reform UK would actually benefit, would actually have would have held on to the seat at the general election. So he could have switched between now and the general election, but he would have lost his seat at the general election. He was going to lose his seat anyway, as a Conservative or as a member of Reform UK. But if it actually happened that Lee Anderson was telling the truth, then it would have been a case of, well, isn't it illegal? Isn't it illegal for political parties to corrupt MPs, members of parliament, to join their ranks? You know, one thing is an MP deciding to cross the aisle. Another thing is an MP being paid to do that. And of course, Reform UK is benefiting from this for publicity reasons. I don't think it was intentional, but people are talking about Reform UK. And Richard Tice is being interviewed on Sky News and other outlets about this. God, the big problem here is that Reform UK are nothing. They're much smaller than the Lib Dems, much smaller than the Green Party, but for some reason they're being amplified. And this may be good for Reform UK, but it's going to be bad for the Conservatives at the general election, because if they field enough candidates, it could really damage the conservative, small C conservative vote, the right-wing vote, because we saw it at the recent by-election, one of the by-elections, if Reform and some of the other parties had stood aside, I think it was National Front was one of them, if they had stood aside, the Conservative would have held on to that seat. So it wasn't just Reform UK on its own, but the right-wing vote was split and it harmed the Conservatives. And that's likely going to be repeated at the general election. To what extent remains to be seen. The by-elections are particular, of course, that you have a particular situation where political parties can pile in a lot of resources onto a candidate, and you can't do that at the general. You don't have the resources. So it will be interesting to see the impact Reform UK will have. It will be much smaller, I believe. But in some constituencies, they could say, let's focus our resources in these constituencies, and it could really damage the Tories. Lee Anderson obviously is going to lose his seat as well. So I don't know what Lee Anderson is planning for the future. Will he be held on at GB News? Probably not, because I think the reason they hired him is because he's an MP, because he's the deputy chair of the Conservative Party, because he's in a senior position. But it was a waste of money. The ratings are pretty crap. Even Jacob Rees-Mogg is doing better than him. Anyway, moving on. So for the Conservatives, it's going to be a bad election. We know that. Realist Tories lose generation of voters over lack of new homes, former housing minister warns. So as we saw there from Brandon Lewis, he was talking about immigration, but there are other issues that are going to affect the Conservatives. The Conservatives face a real risk that they will lose a generation of voters over a lack of house building, according to one of their former housing ministers. Speaking to the Political Hub with Sophie Ridge, Sir Brandon Lewis, I forgot about that. Sir Brandon Lewis explained why he's using his time as a backbencher to encourage the building of more homes. It's a bit late now, Brandon. It's a bit late now. You should have done it back in 2013, although you weren't an MP back in 2013. He served as housing minister. Oh no, he was an MP. Apologies. He served as housing minister between 2014 and 2016 and was a cabinet minister under Boris Johnson before leaving government when Mr. Johnson's ministry collapsed. Why didn't you do something between 2014 and 2016? You were there for 2 years. Why didn't you do something about house building? You did nothing. Sir Brandon was asked by Ridge if the Conservative Party is at risk of losing a generation of voters if they do not build more houses. He said, I think there's a real risk because why would a young person look at the Conservative Party? What is the economic offer? When I was young, you wanted to grow up and own your own home. We know for a fact the majority of people in the country want to own their own home if they don't already. So I think we've always been the party of home ownership. I think we should be the party of home ownership. But it's a bit pointless now at this stage because you're not the party of home ownership. You have thrown young people, especially the youngest generation, under a bus. You haven't, even recently when they were trying to push through measures to protect renters, a number of MPs were against it. Conservative MPs were against it. A few years ago, there was a bill to, what was it, to make homes to renters they should be fit for human habitation. That was the requirement, and a number of Tory MPs voted it down. So the party of home ownership, you're not making it easier. You haven't done it over the last number of years. What you should have been doing was building affordable and social housing, but you did neither. You're not helping renters. You're not helping people get into affordable housing. You've abandoned them. You've just decided, let's let the private sector do all the work. Let's let the private sector make the decisions. And recently, you've helped out the private sector once again when it came to developers not having to pay the extra cost of environmental protection. So we'll pick up the tab there. So this is, and of course, many developers are sitting on land that could be developed, but they know that the price is going to go up, so they're speculating. They're speculating on people's futures, speculating on a generation that need homes, that are struggling to pay rent, struggling to pay mortgages. The vast majority seem to be renting at the moment. No protections. What is the future for them? A renters reform bill, what about that? You know, the Tories will say we need to push through emergency legislation to stop the boats. So we need emergency legislation to undo the problems with Rwanda. And at the end of the day, how many people are going to be sent to Rwanda? About 200 people. This is not an issue. This is not important. A renters reform bill is important. It's been stuck in the House of Commons for years now. Why isn't that fast-tracked? But unfortunately, a lot of these things that the Tories will mention at the moment, there isn't time within this Parliament to get it sorted. So it's pointless talking about it. Guys, there is, I wanted to show you this clip here, a very interesting video here from Ireland about housing. So we know over the last few days there has been a bit of a scandal following the rioting in Dublin city centre. So for people who don't know, what happened was there was an attack carried out by a man who had been living in Ireland. I think he was Algerian. He had been living in Ireland for about 20 years. He was arrested before for possession of a knife, or he had attempted to attack somebody with a knife before, but he had a knife on him. He was arrested. He was released, I believe, because of mental illness, and I don't believe there was place in prison to send him, so the judge decided we're going to let him go because of mental health issues, and he wasn't followed, it seems. But there are a whole lot of issues regarding this as well, surrounding this. Government cuts to public health services, not enough investment in the healthcare service, the health, HSE, the Health Service Executive, mental health, not enough investment in mental health, the judiciary, not enough investment in prisons. There's a whole range of problems here, resulted in this man not maintaining his threat to the public. And last week what he did was he attacked a number of people, including immigrants themselves, seriously injuring a number of them. He was eventually arrested and he was taken away. And then, of course, as the Irish police, the Garda Síochána, were investigating the crime, a crowd of people gathered around the site, and then a riot ensued. Rioters destroyed buildings, destroyed property, buses, police cars, and it was a chaos. And now the people of Dublin are very concerned about walking the streets, very concerned about the lack of policing in the city centre in general. This has been going on for years. I remember when I was living in Dublin about 15 years ago now, time flies, when I was living in Dublin, I remember seeing a teenage boy spitting at a police officer, a Garda Síochána, a Garda. I remember, and I was shocked. Because when I was growing up as a child, we had this idea: you have to respect the police, because of what they represent. They represent law and order. You're supposed to respect that. And I was shocked to see this teenager spitting at a police officer and the police officer not responding. So for me, that raised an alarm bell. And then recently what's happened now is that there isn't enough policing in Dublin, and the situation has gotten out of control. So not so much related to the riots, the motivation behind the riots, but the riots themselves. And the leader of Sinn Féin brought this up in the Dáil, or the Irish Parliament, I think it was today or yesterday.
In the aftermath of these awful events, this vicious knife attack on young children and on a childcare worker, I was actually on the scene. I don't recall seeing any of the members opposite out on the ground to fully appreciate the devastation that was felt at the unfolding events, and the clear realisation very early on that this was very ugly, that there was a very malicious cabal of people who had gathered. They were working their phones and they were clearly mobilising. And I have to say, Lasca and Corla, as I walked our city, the inner city, and I do it regularly, I spoke to countless people, and they all said one thing in common: they all saw it coming. Either they witnessed it with their own eyes or they witnessed it on social media platforms. So we have now the bizarre situation where it seems the only people who didn't see this coming are the people who are actually in charge, the people in leadership positions, the minister, the Garda Commissioner, and it seems the entire benches of the government. You're the only people who didn't see it coming. So let me tell you this. You don't have to convince anyone here or beyond here of the bravery of the Gardaí. We saw it with our own two eyes. We saw Gardaí isolated on their own. One big burly fellow on O'Connell Street beating people off him, isolated in a very dangerous situation. You don't have to tell us about the bus drivers and the taxi drivers or those that work for Dublin City Council. Bravo, they were the heroes of the peace. We know that. They stood by Dublin and they did us proud. Do you know who let us down? You let us down. The Minister for Justice let us down. The Garda Commissioner let us down. You say you're listening to people. Maybe listen to this, because here's reality from Dublin. And by the way, to people who aren't from Dublin, I know this experience is about more than the city, but these events happened here, so let me start here. On any given day, you can walk from Euston Station, you can come along the quays, you can go onto O'Connell Bridge, up onto Nassau Street, you won't see a Garda.
She's completely correct. And I remember when I lived in Dublin, you never saw a Garda, you never saw a police officer. And I remember reading some years ago that there was an issue in London when it came to crime, and the commissioner did, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner or the London City Police, what they did was they decided, okay, let's just put police officers on the street. They didn't actually have to do anything, just walk up and down, and by just having a presence there, it reduced petty crime and reduced vandalism, reduced all sorts of non-serious crime. And if you're able to deal with the non-serious crime, then it eventually, you're able to have the resources available to deal with the more serious crime. Because if you let things get out of hand, of course they're going to escalate. And if there are people who are able to get away, if people believe they can get away with a small crime, then they'll know that they can get away with a much more serious crime as well.
You'll turn the corner and you come to this place. I bet you it's the first time that you will see a uniformed Garda. Equally, you could walk up O'Connell Street, up to Parnell Square itself. You can double back onto Moore Street. You can go on to Mary Street. And what you will see is antisocial behaviour, open drug dealing. On the air, it's timetabled. Open drug taking, nuisance drinking, gangs hanging around, and a feeling of real menace and fear. And that, Count Corley, is not a unique event. That is every single day in the North Inner City. And don't tell me about everything you've done. You've mentioned 2 Garda stations, just for people who don't know, and some of us do. Fitzgibbon Street is not a new Garda station. Ha ha, you closed it for more than a decade. The Garda station on O'Connell Street is a desk with some unfortunate, usually there on their own, and you could literally be about to breathe your last breath out on the street and that unfortunate can't leave the desk. So don't come in here and play a game of make-believe. All I've heard from you is fig leaf, an exercise of the most brazen arse covering that I have ever...
Wow. Arse. I'm not sure if that would be parliamentary language in the House of Commons, but it seems to he can get away with it in the Dáil in Ireland. Everything she's saying here is correct. Now, it's very, and look, I'm trying to be as objective as possible here, because Sinn Féin are not members of the government. Sinn Féin are the official opposition, the biggest party in opposition. So yes, it's okay. It's easy for Sinn Féin to say these things because Sinn Féin is not in charge. I would hope that Sinn Féin will take an approach to crime that they understand, like they will understand the situation, and when they become the party in power, when they become the government, they will talk the talk, they will walk the walk, not just talk the talk, because when you're in opposition you just talk the talk, but when you're in government you need to implement these things. And I think in many ways Sinn Féin are tuned into these problems because they understand a lot of this comes from issues regarding housing, from government cuts to public services, especially when the issues she's talking about here, there isn't enough police. You need to have more guards on the street. As was pointed out in the chat, trickle up crime. Deal with the small problems and the bigger problems will sort themselves out. But also people need to feel safe. People who live in the city, who work in the city, should have the right to feel safe. And if they don't feel safe, that's a failure of government. It's a failure of the city hall. It's a failure of the police commissioner, the Garda commissioner. So, and the justice minister, of course. They have to, and how do you make people feel safe? By having a police presence. The police, as I said, they don't actually have to do something. They just have to walk up and down. If the police are not there, then people will take advantage of the situation. If the police are there, they'll move on, and you may be ending up moving the problem somewhere else. But if you have enough of a presence, people will not feel that they're free to commit crimes.
Ever heard in this chamber? Children got stabbed outside their school. I never thought that those words would come from my lips, that was possible in our city, but it happened. And then not alone that, the children and the community is doubly traumatised by this marauding mob rioting in our city. And control of the city centre was lost for 2 hours. That's what happened. And I want to know, what's your real response to that? Because what we witnessed, make no mistake, was a political failure. A wholesale, abject failure of leadership. That is what is missing. And I'm not trying to score any points here. I am representing the people that...
Okay, so the response from the rest of the Parliament to the Dáil is, they're laughing at her for saying that she's trying to score points. You shouldn't really say, I'm not here to try and score points, because then it attracts the attention to what you're actually saying about the point scoring. But it's necessary that something is implemented. So I do hope that what the government will take from this is that we need to invest in resources. But it's not just fighting crime. Crime is a symptom of the problem. The problem itself is poverty, and housing is another issue that needs to be resolved. Because what's happening at the moment when it came to the rioting was there was a build-up of resentment and people taking advantage of that resentment. There are poor communities where people are struggling. They have no public services. They're on their own, basically. The police do not enter those areas because they don't have the resources, and also there are gangs operating in those areas. So there are sort of no-go areas in Dublin. That's not acceptable. But the government don't provide the government don't provide the police with the resources necessary to deal with that. There needs to be also community policing. That takes time and it takes effort. You need people on the ground, community leaders who are working with the police, and the police need to be working with the community leaders. That takes time, and it takes resources. But it's not just about crime. It also has to. The other issue has to be dealt with, of course, is housing. And as I said, it's resentment. You have maybe asylum seekers being moved into a poorer area, and the word gets round that they've been given a house, they've been given a car, they've been given a mobile phone, they've been given everything. This is the thing that the local people are being told by the right wing. The right wing in those communities are pushing this narrative. The people come in, they get everything. We native people, quote unquote, working hard all our lives, we get nothing. We get nothing from the state. They don't care about us. They care about them. It's all this virtue signaling or whatever. And this creates resentment. And then this resentment can be weaponized by the right wing. Look, here is one of them who got everything turning on us. We have to turn on the state, or we have to turn on the police, or we have to turn on. And of course, the right wing are very happy to point the finger, to throw the stone and hide the hand. So it's nothing to do with us. And now you are seeing this response from the right wing saying everyone is right wing or nobody is right wing. It's very concerning because things have gotten out of control. These things should have been resolved much sooner. Community leaders have been talking about how, we need more housing, we need more social housing, more affordable housing. And like in Britain, the government have outsourced this responsibility to the private sector. And private landlords are providing the social, quote unquote, social and affordable housing when the state should be doing it. Councils should have the resources necessary. They should be building council homes, but they're not. The state should be building council homes, building affordable and social housing, but they're not. There is a big problem with members of parliament in the Dáil, TDs, who are landlords. Many of them are making money out of maintaining the status quo. It seems to be less of a case in Sinn Féin. So if Sinn Féin became the government, they would be less likely to be supporting landlords, for example. But this is very worrying, and it's going to continue until something is done about it. So guys, I just want to move on to this final story for tonight about Dominic Cummings. Remember him? How can we forget Dominic Cummings? Dominic Cummings joked about trip to... just close that for a moment. Dominic Cummings joked about trip to countryside before Barnard Castle visit. Dominic Cummings joked in a private message about taking his family to the countryside in March 2020, about a fortnight before he infamously did just that in apparent breach of the lockdown rules. So this is as a result of the WhatsApp messages that were read to the COVID inquiry over the last number of days. And he looks like he's an AI image or something. He's so false. In an air Audrey of his infamous trip to Durham and then Barnard Castle, Cummings, then the chief aide to Boris Johnson, made the comment to Michael Gove as the two complained about the lack of action in tackling the COVID pandemic. The messages shown during Gove's evidence to the COVID inquiry on Tuesday began on the 4th of March when Gove, then the lead cabinet office minister, messaged Cummings, "We are fucking up as a government and missing golden opportunities. The whole situation is even worse than you think, and action needs to be taken or we'll regret it for a long time." What does he mean by golden opportunities? Golden opportunities. Now, I think golden opportunities is where they were talking about reforming the civil service. They wanted to change the civil service and put people in charge that were loyal to them. Dominic Cummings definitely that was his plan. To gut the civil service and put people that agreed with him in charge, to reduce the size of government. These people are interested in having a small government. The government's job, in their eyes, is just to funnel more money to the private sector. It's like a sort of money-making factory for the private sector. And we saw that during the pandemic, where when it came to PPE contracts, well, our friends and donors, we give them the contracts. That's what government's job is. That for For us on the outside, that's terrible. For them on the inside, this is a golden opportunity. Gove told the inquiry that this was about a series of issues, not just COVID, but after a pause during which he missed 5 voice calls from Cummings, the duo resumed a discussion on what Cummings called the Corona Hell. On the 11th of March, Cummings messaged Gove to say that the Cabinet Office was a fucking joke, saying they told us they had a plan, obvious bollocks. After Gove replied, indeed, Cummings went on to joke, I'm tempted to take the family to the countryside and hold a press conference saying, you're on your own. The Cabinet Office and Parliament have fucked us all. He added, people should be shot. He told, which Gove replied, who do you envisage first in line? And he didn't say. Boris Johnson, probably not. Probably somebody within the civil service, I imagine. Because I think what was happening at the time was that Gove and Cummings wanted to reform the civil service. The civil service responded by saying, no, you can't do this now. If you want reform, okay, later on, but we're in the middle of a fucking pandemic. It's so unlike Dom to use foul language. He's normally such a reserved individual. He was really testing high banana polisher. So he joked about going to the countryside, and then he went to the countryside. Was it really a joke? He was, let me put out this joke and see how people react to it. If people react negatively, I say it was just a joke. If people don't say anything, then it's a green light to break the rules. But I think Dominic Cummings was the worst of the lot, because one thing about Boris Johnson having his parties or whatever, Dominic Cummings, the fact that he broke the rules and then was invited back to the Rose Garden to deliver this monologue to the press about him testing his eyesight or him being concerned about his family and stuff like this is utter bullshit. I remember doing a response to it, and it was just absurdity piled upon absurdity, and the fact that he was so brazen about it, so he was so indifferent to the consequences of his actions. Because, of course, this undermined the government's trust with the public. The government, at the time, before we heard about Boris Johnson's parties and everything, it was about convincing the public, you need to follow the rules, you need to save lives, you need to do this. You're making a sacrifice, but the sacrifice is part of something bigger. And then you had Dominic Cummings going to Barnard Castle and not being fired over it. I think that was probably, for me, that was the worst part. Because all of the other stuff came out after. Boris Johnson should have resigned, Boris Johnson, whatever. But a lot of the stuff that came out after was after the fact. But this was right in the middle of the pandemic. There was no getting around it. He was their Steve Bannon, yes. How does that spell UBI? Universal Basic Income. You're not going to get me on it once again. I explained it the last time. So guys, we're a little bit over the time, so I want to say thank you so much to everyone who came on tonight. Thank you for smashing the like button. I'm sure you did. If you didn't, you can do it on the way out. Thanks to the moderators for doing a wonderful job. Thanks to everyone who sent a super chat, and to Alistair in particular for sending out those invites. Thank you so much for doing that, Alistair. So I'll see you on Friday, same bad time, same bad channel. But of course, before we go, we have our one for the road. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm sure you will.
Rishi Sunak finds himself at the centre of a diplomatic storm this week after his cancellation of a meeting with the Greek Prime Minister over comments that he made about the Parthenon sculptures. I'm joined by the Minister for Imperial Nostalgia, the Right Honourable Geoff Jeffrey.
Elgin marbles.
What?
You said the Parthenon sculptures. It's actually the Elgin marbles.
Are they not the same thing?
Yes, but what you call something matters. It's the difference between calling someone a shithole and calling somewhere a shithole.
Minister, you can't use that kind of language on air.
Sorry, you're right. I'll save that for the House of Commons.
Coming back to the Parthenon... the Elgin marbles. Thank you. The Greek government has been asking for them to be returned for decades. Why did Rishi Sunak react so badly this week? Can I make it clear that he did offer him a meeting with the Deputy Prime Minister instead? Oliver Dowden. That's right. Unfortunately, that proved not to be possible. Because nobody wants to meet with Oliver Dowden? Probably. But look, possession is 9/10 of the law. Suella told me that, and I'm sure she was some sort of lawyer. Don't you think this all looks a bit petty? Not at all. This is what people voted for. When? When the will of the people voted to leave the EU and not send them any sculptures in return. I don't remember seeing that on the ballot paper. It was implied. Do you really think this is something voters care about? I know it is. I've had dozens of tweets about it already today. My constituents are furious. Many of them are so furious they keep slipping into Russian, which as we all know is the angriest of languages, right? This could be just the issue to firm up the red wall, because if people in the north know one thing, it's how dreadful it is to lose something that they relied on. What? Because I don't know about you, but I rely on the Elgin marbles every day. Really? Yes. Every morning I pop into the British Museum and I just gaze on them. They remind me of a happier time. A time when a British man could just go and take what he wanted. And then he could put it in whatever bin he wanted without worrying about someone from Greece or the local council telling him any different. Thank you, Minister. Stop the boats! Next up, as Liz Truss backs a second Trump presidency, we ask, is it possible for an endorsement from a former world leader to change literally nobody's mind? And how long did it take you to realise that Liz Truss is technically a former world leader?
I wonder if the guy who had appeared in the video is maybe Sir Edward Lee. Anyway, guys, have a great week. I'll see you on Friday, same bad time, same bad channel. As always, stay safe. Good night.